And welcome to Stack Hunters. I'm Bradley Stalder, and joining me tonight, Billy Muzio, Director of Operations for Player Profiler. Billy, you've been on a marathon drafting this week, and you will continue to do so through the start of the season. How are you faring? How's your beard doing? How is life in the draft streets?
I haven't showered in like 5 days. I just take the oils, just rub it into the beard now. No, all kidding aside, I'm a little tired, but this is expected this time of year. It's prime drafting season. There's a bunch of tourists out in the FFPC streets. They're getting their main event drafts in. Their 350s, the Fantasy Pros Championship. I was trying to max out the best ball. I eclipsed the 100 in the second tournament. I don't think I'm going to get 150, but I'll probably settle around the 120 mark. So got pretty close to maxing that thing out between, my teams and the team with Dave and some teams with Theo and the podcast, et cetera, and yours. And so it's been a long couple weeks here, the tail end of the off season. Last big push is to get the projections updated tonight as well with all the cuts. A lot of news today that affects the overall construction of the projections, and then try to get that cheat sheet updated for all the drafts, and then maybe get some sleep in between.
That's right. Lots of news today hitting the streets, some more important than others. But I think the biggest headline before we get into tonight's topic is, of course, Jonathan Taylor. So Taylor, if we remember, his ADP back in May was 13th overall. He's now dropped to 27th overall and just continues to plummet. I was asked in the Discord for Player Profiler, how far is Jonathan Taylor going to fall? And for me, and Billy, I'd like your take on this too, I think it's around the David Montgomery tier-ish, maybe a little bit lower, maybe a little bit higher, but around that spot is about where maybe running back 27 to 30 is probably as far as I'd let him fall. But I think my trepidation has to do with, is the ankle still okay? Because if it's still not okay, it doesn't matter how elite he is or if he's playing on the Indianapolis Colts. I think there's a lot of factors at play here, not just that Jonathan Taylor is holding out or initially placed on the PUP.
Yeah, it's a complicated situation. He was one of my players to avoid when I guest appeared on the Fantasy Pros podcast. People didn't like it, but here we are, boys. I was right. I was wrong about Jacobs. Receipts. I also had Jacobs in there, so hold that receipt because I was wrong on that one. I did not think he was going to be back week 1. So 1 for 2, not bad. I'll take it. That being said, Taylor's situation is still messy, and we know he's out at least to 4 weeks, but he still accrues those games, Bradley, which is the important piece of information here, because all he needs is 6, and not even showing up for the first 4, he gets to acquire those games as part of his accrual base. And so once he hits 6, he has his year of eligibility, which is no longer now in a contract year again. Because if he did not get his 6 games in, he would be in another contract year going into next year because he wouldn't accrue a year of eligibility. So this is one of those things we really have to watch, because now he could potentially only suit up for 2 games all season. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it is a possibility where ankle's not right. Maybe they extend him and they, leave him, they put him on IR. Maybe he comes back and plays 2 games, or maybe he gets 2 games out of the way early and then he says his ankle isn't right. So it's one of those situations where the relationship is sour. He doesn't want to be there. We've now see him on the PUP. He wasn't traded. So maybe we see him as a trade candidate before we hit the trade deadline, and that changes things. But as of right now, I'm not really comfortable drafting him. I'm really regretting I had a monster team out of the 9 hole where Stephon Diggs, where Tyreek Hill fell to me at the 9 hole, and I got Amon-Ra St. Brown on the way back in round 2. And lo and behold, this was 2 days ago, JT was sitting there at 3-9, and I said, I'm going to take a gamble in case he gets traded to Miami, thinking I could have this monster build and hit a home run shot. And now I'm looking at that team, and I feel like I just wasted a Tyreek Hill, Amon-Ra St. Brown stack, or build, I should say. And now I don't have a running back for 4 weeks. And so I'm not comfortable taking him. I would much rather have David Montgomery ahead of him in drafts as it stands right now. I would probably be more comfortable taking him like around the Khalil Herbert, AJ Dillon range, that 8-9 round, I think. That's where I'm comfortable taking him. But that you might even be too early based upon the complexity of his injury and his status with the Colts.
Yeah, I had been avoiding JT mostly. 0% exposure on Underdog, 5% exposure on DraftKings, 0% on the FFPC, 10% on Drafters, but I hadn't been doing as much volume drafting on there. So I think that's from before the injury. Nevertheless, JT, this is a player that would end up on this list anyways, round by round landmines, players to avoid. We've already gotten him out of the way. Let's begin in round one. For me, it's still Bijan Robinson. I thought I was high on him when I predicted he would be a top 5 running back this year, way back. I don't know, 8-9 months ago when Fantasy Pros had me on and asked me for a bold prediction. I said Bijan Robinson would be a top 5 running back for this year, and that seems to be a freezing cold take. But I think there should be a healthy amount of skepticism for how efficient this Atlanta offense is going to be. Tyler Algier is going to be involved in this offense. I do have Bijan projected for 310 touches and 13 touchdowns, but for him to pay off, he needs to be either running back 1 or running back 2, because right now he's going as running back 3, and many people are taking him as the running back 1 or 2 overall. There's going to be rushing volume there, but I don't know if he's going to get the goal line volume that can get him into the 15 touchdowns and the 50 targets, the 40 receptions. I don't know if that is strongly within the range of outcomes, because that's what it would take for him to pay off. It feels like he's not going to get there given the talent that's behind him, given the lack of trust that we have with Arthur Smith as a coach. So, and of course, the second-year quarterback, Desmond Ridder, we don't know what he will look like. I have concerns about this entire situation, the Atlanta Falcons, Bijan Robinson in particular.
Man, Bijan, man. It's one of the players that, like, I love the talent. I don't love the situation. Right. But he could just be so good where it's just going to burn me. He has moved up my projections based upon what we've seen in the passing work. And I still don't think he hits the targets that are going to be necessary to pay off his draft capital, but they run the ball so damn much that he could make it up for it on the ground, right? What if he's like, I have him projected for like 56% of the rushing share, which is, looking at the projections, let me just double check the numbers real quick. I believe it's like 270 attempts. Yeah, so 266 attempts, so pretty close to 270. And so that being said, like, what if it's 60%, right? That extra 4% where it's going to push him into that easily top 3 running back threshold now, because not many running backs in the league are getting 60% of the rushing share, which that would then make up for the extra 10, maybe 15, 20 targets that we're talking about. So it's a very tough player to project, in my opinion. The field as in general is just very high on him. I've covered around, but I'm still not as high as the field is.
All right, Billy, give us a player that you're avoiding in round 1.
Player that I'm avoiding in round 1.
Or that could be a landmine in round 1.
Yeah, there's a couple. Bijan, I think, was one of my, I think, go-to answers. The other one's kind of cheating, but I'm going to do it anyways because he kind of goes at the 1-2 turn pretty consistently. And that's going to be Davante Adams. So we see him kind of go anywhere from like the 211 to like the 2-3. So I'm kind of going to cut the corner on this one and say Davante Adams. I love Davante Adams, what he's been able to do in his career, but I have seen Jimmy Garoppolo firsthand and what he's done on my Niners. I think that he is going to hold this offense back altogether, and he's going to frustrate Davante Adams. I think that we're going to see a significant decline in targets overall for Davante Adams. We're not going to see the volume that we saw last year in this offense from a passing standpoint. Especially, we know that Jimmy Garoppolo has not been able to stay healthy in his career. And I don't like the backups that we have here at the time being. I think they have some options and some growth potentials, but right out the gates, it's a little scary. So Davante Adams, my landmine at the end of round 1. I kind of cheated there, Bradley.
That's okay. Sometimes Davante Adams goes into round 2, but we'll let it slide. Before we move on, let's hear from our sponsors at Underdog Fantasy.
Let's take a moment to talk about Underdog Fantasy. Now, many of you have already signed up. Thousands have signed up from PlayerProfiler already over the years. Underdog has supported us since 2020. Much of what you see on PlayerProfiler is because of Underdog, because of their support. Get the Underdog app. plug in that promo code Underworld. I used to play Underdog just for the best ball drafts. I mean, the best ball drafts are amazing. These draft rooms fill so quickly, and you can win life-changing money. You want to take advantage of all the sleepers we talk about on this show? Well, what better place than in an Underdog draft room to do that? And I recommend taking your Underdog play to the next level by diving into their NFL pick'ems. It's important to correlate those NFL pick'ems. You can pick both the quarterbacks and the wide receivers to exceed expectations. Correlate them, and you can 5x your payout. Bada bing, bada boom. Underdog Fantasy, the promo code is Underworld. For an instant deposit match up to $100, Underdog is the truest friend of the Underworld.
That's right. Use promo code Underworld on Underdog Fantasy. They're still filling the BBM4 drafts. Make sure you guys are checking it out. Underdog Fantasy. Into round 2, I think the biggest landmine in round 2 is wide receiver Chris Olave. Olave last year, rookie year. Oh, Billy hates this. Biggest Billy hates this one. But Olave, a 0% top 5 rate among wide receivers. Only one other wide receiver is being drafted in the top 12 right now that had a 0% top 5 rate last year. And that was with Michael Thomas missing all but 3 games. He had plenty of opportunity. It was just Rashid Shaheed and Jawan Johnson, right? The Saints project still to be one of the run heaviest teams in the NFL. And I'm not confident that Derek Carr is much of an improvement over Andy Dalton. If we look at the efficiency metrics that Dalton put up last year, they were actually pretty respectable. The PFF passing grade, the NFL passer grade, it was just the reason why the stats looked bad for Dalton was because of the passing volume. It was just too low. And I don't think that that is going to be different this year for Derek Carr, because the Saints have signaled to us that they're going to be running pretty heavily. They signed Jamal Williams, who had 17 rushing touchdowns last year. They drafted Kendre Miller, and Alvin Kamara is only suspended for 3 games. Plus, your boy Taysom Hill is still on the team, Billy. So I don't mind Olave in round 3 as like your wide receiver 3 if you're trying to build like a power wide receiver team. But round 2 is a pretty steep price for a player that I don't have confidence can continue to be elevated by Derek Carr in this type of offense.
Oh, man, Bradley, this one makes me sad because I love Chris Olave this year.
I love the profile, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that this is, once again, a circumstance situation that can elevate him.
Love the profile. I think the circumstance is better than it was last year, even with Michael Thomas back in the mix. I agree with you that Andy Dalton was serviceable last year with 7.6 yards per attempt. He had a 66.7 completion percentage. That being said, he didn't throw the ball all that much. So 378 attempts on 14 games, where in comparison, let's just use 15 games that Derek Carr played last year was 502 attempts. Prior to that, in 2021, Derek Carr threw the ball 626 attempts. And so I would expect Carr to throw the ball significantly more than Andy Dalton in this offense, which in turn is going to bump up the overall receptions for all the receiving core, the total yards for all the receiving core, the touchdowns. So that's just going to help inflate all the numbers of all the receivers here. We saw even on the 378 attempts from Andy Dalton last year, and the other quarterbacks were mixed in, Olave still had 119 targets. He clipped the 1,000-yard mark in his rookie campaign, only 4 touchdowns, and still finished as wide receiver 25 in fantasy points per game. I think that's just the beginning for Olave. I think that we could easily see him inside the top 13, 14 at the position. I easily think he's going to eclipse the 1,000-yard mark this year. I have him projected for closer to 6 touchdowns this year. I think it's 6.8. And so I like Chris Olave and where he's going to draft. So it's a little disappointing to hear that. For me, my landmine, and this was going to be my round 3 landmine, but Bradley, he snuck up into round 2 as of late.
Oh, no. Don't do it to me. Don't do it to me.
Calvin Ridley.
No. No.
Because now he's in round 2. I've seen him go inside the FFPC main event and the FFPC Fantasy Pros Championship.
He went at the 202.
Yeah, he went at the 202, but I'm just, that one I'll just call an anomaly. But he consistently goes now at like the 209, 210, 211, and I'm out. I just can't do it at that price. So he's going off the board inside the top 15 like clockwork. He's only finished inside the top 15 I think once in his career, I better double check the numbers before I misspeak, because I get called out on this when I do this, when I don't look it up. Yeah, he's finished inside the top 15 once in his career. It was 2020. It was the year Julio Jones got hurt, where he had 18.8 fantasy points per game. Outside that, Bradley, he's never once eclipsed the 1,000-yard mark. Outside of that 1 year, he's never eclipsed the 90 reception mark. He's actually never finished higher than 64 receptions in any point in his career outside that 1 year. He's never had 100 targets or more outside that 1 year. And so I get it. He's a talented player. He's in a better situation on a better offense, but he hasn't played football in a year and a half. He's going to be 29 here shortly, and there's a lot of changes. So although I like him, people think when I say this that I'm like, I hate Calvin Ridley. No, I don't hate Calvin Ridley. I think Calvin Ridley's a great player. I think he's a good football player. I just don't like him inside the top 15. I like him as like wide receiver 20, wide receiver 21, wide receiver 12, 13, 14, 15. Like he went, like you said, the 202 the other day. Like, get out of here. 202. People are taking him over Garrett Wilson, AJ Brown in some of those drafts. It's just nuts.
I will continue to take discounts on Calvin Ridley. That's why I draft a lot of him. I do like his profile. I've given my reasons. I'm pro Calvin Ridley this year. It doesn't mean I'm anti Christian Kirk, for the record, but Calvin Ridley is my dude. So,
all right, hold up. If you're on the clock at the end of the round 2 and you have Jalen Waddle, Davante Smith, and Calvin Ridley staring you in the face, who are you drafting?
Waddle.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Waddle, then Ridley, and then Devonta Smith.
Oh man, I like Devonta Smith, but I get it.
Yeah,
I get why people like him. It's just a little steep for me.
Let's move on to round 3, Billy. For me, it's Amari Cooper. Cooper did set career highs in targets, in yards per reception, and air yards last year. All of this despite finishing wide receiver 30 or worse in 5 of 6 games with Deshaun Watson starting. Now, Deshaun Watson is going to be the starter. It seems like he's brushed off a little bit more rust, but Deshaun Watson is playing outdoors. He played almost all of his games in the Dome in Houston, and the addition of Elijah Moore, that's eyebrow raising. You know, I'm not sure what your opinion of Elijah Moore is. I loved his profile coming out of Ole Miss. I thought he was going to be the next big thing. And then somehow he ended up on Salah's like doghouse list, and things just went from bad to worse for Elijah Moore. I think he's still really talented. But it's interesting to me that the Browns went out and they got Elijah Moore. They drafted Cedric Tillman. They retained DPJ. They're still rolling with a respectable top 10 tight end in David Njoku. And that's a lot of mouths to feed. For most of the season, it was just Amari Cooper being targeted really heavily by a surprising Jacoby Brissett last year. I think that Amari Cooper will still give you some spike weeks, like maybe. So for best ball, of course, you're going to be, interested in him maybe in the 4th round, let him fall a little bit. But for the 3rd round, you're expecting him to be a pretty consistent producer and a high achiever. And I don't think Amari Cooper can give you the consistency that you want from a round 3 selection.
I'm on board with this one. Yeah, I'm out on Amari Cooper as well at cost right now. We do see him slipping around 4 from time to time. It's probably where he belongs more than around 3. The chemistry, he just lacked it with Watson down the stretch as well. We saw DPJ consistently finished as a top 35 receiver. It seemed like they had more of a connection. You already talked about the addition of Elijah Moore. We already know that they have David Njoku. There's a lot of mouths to feed. We also know Watson has struggled in his return, and we probably going to see some of those struggles continue here into 2023. I do expect him to be better this year, but probably not to his old form that we were used to in Houston. And so I am on board with fading Amari Cooper in round 3. My next one actually pains me, Bradley, because it was a player I was very high on in the beginning of the year. They cooled my jets because the Patriots always do it to me, Bradley. A year in and year out, they get me when I think that we're going to see a lead back inside this backfield. And yet again, here we go. Hoodie pulled one over on me. And Rhamondre Stevenson is the back now that I'm fading in round 3. Love him as a player, love his talent. Love what he did last year, where he saw 69 receptions and he saw 89 targets, which was 3rd most in the league, with 1,000 rushing yards. There was a lot to like about Rhamondre Stevenson. There's still a lot to like about Rhamondre Stevenson. But with Zeke in town now, it changes things slightly for me. It just pushes his value down enough to where I'm just not comfortable taking him in round 3, even at the tail end, because Zeke, although he is old and in the words of Theo, dusted, we're still going to see him probably rush the ball for close to 200 rushing attempts. We're probably going to see him utilized pretty heavily in goal line packages because he falls forward a lot. He's still a capable pass catcher, and word on the street is that he is, eating into some of those targets inside of practice as well with Rhamondre Stevenson. So it's just enough of a nuisance to where he's going to eat into the workload of Rhamondre Stevenson enough to where it drops him down in my projections enough just to get him outside of the round 3.
I agree with you, Rhamondre Stevenson. I agree with him being a fade. I think end of round 4 is maybe where I would be comfortable taking him. And I've gotten him in some of the DK drafts there, especially in full PPR. That feels pretty nice. But in round 3, it feels spicy with Ezekiel Elliott getting a lot of the goal line work and have a history of converting goal line rushes. The other thing that we need to keep in mind is the confidence that this coaching staff has in Ezekiel Elliott, because they just traded Pierre Strong. They just cut Kevin Harris. They just cut Ty Montgomery. It's clear that Ezekiel Elliott is going to play a significant role in this offense. So I agree with you. The pass catching, the pass blocking, the goal line work, a lot of it can go to Zeke, even if he's not very efficient, even if Rhamondre is the better talent at this point in his career. All right, round 4 for me. I feel like this is chalk, though. I feel like every single fantasy analyst is going to be harping on round 4 Najee Harris. Round 4 Najee Harris, right? It feels like a dead horse has just been beaten over and over again. But there are valid concerns about drafting Najee Harris in round 4. Harris hasn't averaged 4 yards per carry in either of his first 2 seasons. And despite juking and evading tacklers at a top 10 rate, his breakaway run rate last year was 51st overall among all running backs, and it was outside the top 24 his rookie season. So he's not evading people, even though he's trying to do these moves. He's just not elusive. He's not able to create yards on his own. He's not very fast, and he's a below average pass catcher. So while I believe that the Pittsburgh Steelers offense is going to be better, I like some upside from Pickens in best ball, from Pickett. I like Deontay Johnson in the full PPR. I think Najee Harris has some red flags that we can't ignore, and I haven't mentioned Jaylen Warren yet, but Warren's probably going to get at least a third of the snaps, and that's concerning for Najee as well.
I'm piggybacking on this one, Bradley. I'm not going to take another player because Najee Harris needs to be a double fade in this round just because of his inefficiencies. I know his line is improved this year and it's going to be beneficial for the team overall, but you mentioned Jaylen Warren at the end, and I think 30% might be light in comparison to what I have projected for. I have him closer to the 40% mark inside of snaps and workload on this offense, and that's going to eat into Najee Harris's overall opportunity share, where he's this is what's propped his fantasy points up. Right. He was wide receiver number 10 in opportunity share last year at 69.9%. In weighted opportunities, running back number 8 with 246.4. So if you have any addition of competition in any targets or carries, it's not going to be good for Najee because he has not been efficient. 3.9 yards per carry his rookie season, 3.8 yards per carry last year. Only reason he eclipsed the 1,200-yard mark was because he had 307 attempts his rookie year, and the only reason he eclipsed the 1,000-yard mark last year was because he had 272 attempts last year. I don't think we're going to see that type of volume here going into 2023, and this is an easy fade for me in round 4.
Easy fades in round 4. If you guys are liking this content, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button on the YouTube channel. Round 5, fade for me, Terry McLaurin. And this is a player that might be gone for the first 2 weeks. We're monitoring the situation, the toe situation. He might play week 1. He might not. But it's deeper than that because we also have some confidence in Jahan Dotson. Jahan Dotson had a higher rate of top 18 weeks last year, and that was even with Dotson leaving some games early. And look, McLaurin will probably still be okay for fantasy. Like he's been a wide receiver 28 to 20 every single season, but he's not been better than wide receiver 20 in any of his 4 seasons. And why would that change? There's a rookie quarterback. Maybe Eric Bieniemy is there, but what are we seeing that's going to change our minds on Terry McLaurin can now somehow elevate from being a back end wide receiver 2 to now suddenly high end wide receiver 2? How can he surprise? I don't think so. And that's why when I'm trying to target these players in like round 5, round 4, I want players who have the potential to pay off. I don't want someone who will probably just give me, return back what their ADP is. And Terry McLaurin's clearly limited in his ceiling based on what we've seen over 4 years of his career.
Call him Turf Toe Terry. Can we just agree? Turf Toe Terry.
Turf Toe Terry.
Yeah, Turf Toe Terry. I liked him more before the Turf Toe, but I also was a big fan of Jahan Dotson. This offense just scares me a little bit this year. Although Howell has looked really good, I'm a big believer in looking at like the shootout schedule, weeks 15, 16, and 17, and they have a brutal like schedule for where the money counts inside of fantasy. So the Rams week 15 is the easiest matchup, but then they come back week 16 and get the Jets. Come back week 17 against the Niners.
It's your Niners, yeah.
And they're just going to get destroyed on the front. Like it's going to be bad for them. And so I have been fading this team just because of the schedule, and it's going to hurt when the money's on the line. But also, I mean, you talked about it. Jahan Dotson emergence last year was something that can't be ignored. In only 12 games, 7 touchdowns, almost 15 yards per reception. I mean, the kid is talented. And you look at Terry McLaurin, who's been a very consistent receiver, hitting 1,000 yards year in and year out, but just really hasn't done enough for me at least, to call him like a must get, right? He's been wide receiver 29, wide receiver 20, wide receiver 29, wide receiver 22. He hasn't eclipsed that wide receiver 20 mark, as to like to your point, where Jahan Dotson came in and immediately inserted himself as a red zone presence. And so I think that his emergence is going to hinder Terry McLaurin. The Turf Toe on top of that is going to do even more. My fade inside this round is Javonte Williams, who was not even close to this round weeks ago because of the injury, but now has really skyrocketed up boards because he's going to be ready a lot sooner than any of us ever expected. That being said, I still don't think he sees full snaps. I don't think they're going to throw him out there where we saw him in the beginning of last year, seeing that 65% snap share, 60% snap share. I think that we're looking closer to like 35, 40% to start the season, because he's coming off a pretty gruesome injury. He tore his ACL, his LCL, and PCL. And so we've seen the statistics based upon just ACL injuries, where we've only had 2 running backs ever finish inside the top 20th position coming off this injury. Throw in all 3, and you want to guess what the number is, Bradley?
Minuscule.
0. And so very serious concerns here with Javonte Williams. The way he runs just in general as well, he runs hard, he runs aggressive, he runs violent. It's not going to be good coming off that knee injury, in my opinion.
Yeah, so in the comments, someone's asking about Samaje Perine rounds 10 and 11. If we're fading Javonte Williams, then the natural move is to be drafting a little bit more Samaje Perine.
Yeah, I think it depends on the build. Like, this is where I don't like to take them both. In a confined league, I think it makes sense. But what I like doing with Samaje Perine is perfect play with Breece Hall, because you get the upside play with Breece Hall. They don't absolutely need him right now. They have Dalvin Cook. They can rest him a little bit more. The team is probably going to rely on Aaron Rodgers and his gameplay and his pace and managing the game. And we're going to, ease him into the play. And we know how talented Breece Hall was last year. We've seen it. And if he didn't have that injury, he's coming off an ACL as well. But if he didn't have that injury, we're probably talking about a round 1 pick, where maybe Javonte is tailing around 1 without the injury, more likely a round 2 pick. Bottom line, I don't like owning the handcuff of the same team, especially in tournament builds. But if I'm doing this, I'll take Samaje Perine around 10, 11. I'll take Breece Hall if he falls to me in like rounds. I got him around 6 in a main event the other day. And so Breece Hall round 6, take Samaje Perine, be able to rely on him early in the season, and then kind of fade him out as Hall's coming in.
All right. We love that strategery. In round 6, my biggest fade is Miles Sanders. Some of you saw my TikTok on the Player Profiler TikTok page. If you guys haven't subscribed there, make sure you're checking out the TikToks that are being posted on the TikTok. Miles Sanders, though, in round 6, Sanders feasted last year, right? He said, don't draft me. And then he proceeds to have a massive season, double-digit touchdowns, right? 1,000 yards. Glorious for fantasy managers who drafted him late. Miles Sanders and Josh Jacobs were the saviors for many of us, but he was behind one of the best offensive lines. He was on one of the best offenses in general to put him into goal line situations, but now he moves to Carolina. Yes, he's paid a lot of money, but Carolina does not project to be a very good offense. And to make matters worse, Miles Sanders has dealt with a groin injury this summer, and he's been splitting carries this preseason 50-50 with Chuba Hubbard. Hubbard was actually pretty decent last year in an efficiency metrics side. Like, Miles Sanders has been given a lot of grief after his rookie season for his pass catching. Chuba Hubbard, on the other hand, last year was running back 2 overall in yards per reception. He was running back 9 in yards per route run, running back 10 in NFL passer rating when targeted. And Chuba was a decent rusher himself. He was running back 19 in PFF rush grade. And Sanders hasn't caught more than 30 passes since his rookie season, and he hasn't been better than running back 17 throughout his career. Once again, this is buying into the volume trap. We project Miles Sanders to get the majority of the volume, but it's on a bad team with another player that is decent enough in efficiency. I have concerns about Miles Sanders paying off this season, especially at a higher price than last year.
Oh, Bradley, I don't like this one. I like Miles Sanders. I think I'm going to play devil's advocate here. I think we're going to see more involvement in the passing game. If you look back to his rookie season, he was very involved in the passing game. And then the very next year, Jalen Hurts was inserted as a quarterback, who's a rushing quarterback, who did not check the ball down. And we saw his passing volume dip off significantly. I think he sees enough passing work to make up for what he loses on the ground here, and his efficiency behind, he was running behind one of the best offensive lines. And we know that Carolina is not nearly as good on the offensive front as the Eagles were, but I think he makes up for it in the passing game. So I'll just throw that 2 cents in there. I won't rain on the parade here because I like him. But Kyle Pitts for me is the fade here in round 6. I like Kyle Pitts, the talent. I just don't trust the coaching staff here in Atlanta. I don't think Arthur Smith is smart enough to utilize his playmakers the way he should. He consistently misuses Kyle Pitts and runs him in places he shouldn't run, like an X receiver when he should run him in line. We know they added Bijan Robinson. Atlanta is projected for me to be bottom 2 in the league in total pass attempts. I just don't think there's enough volume out there to support him at his ADP and where he's going at cost. Unless Desmond Ridder takes a massive step forward and averages like 33 attempts a game, which I don't think is going to happen. He was, on pace for 28.5 last year. And so we would need to see a significant boost in overall attempts for him to return this value. And we just haven't seen it so far from Kyle Pitts. Hasn't finished better than wide receiver 11, tight end 11 in fantasy points per game. Last year in his small sample size, 10 games, was tight end 22 in fantasy points per game. So I'm fading here at cost.
Yeah, Kyle Pitts is one of those that, like, there's such a tier break, though. And I think, as fantasy drafters, we have to think, is it worth that tier? And especially in lineup setting. Like in non-lineup setting leagues, like best ball leagues, like you can take your shots on Kyle Pitts and then later, your Hunter Henrys and your Mike Gesicki's, those type of high upside plays. But when it comes to setting your lineup, I think it's a much more difficult click because that, am I going to be okay with Kyle Pitts, who can explode, but has the major questions on the offense? Or am I okay with a Pat Freiermuth who's going to consistently get me like 8 to 10 fantasy points, but almost never bust, right? That's something that fantasy managers are going to be struggling with, I think, as they are drafting here over this next week or so. What type of consistency and what type of risk tolerance are you willing to take on? In round 7 for me, it's Alvin Kamara, a player that I think can be a landmine. He's suspended for 3 games, but that's not the primary argument for me. Kamara has lost his efficiency over the past 2 seasons, and I think that's primarily to do with him getting 220 carries or more each of those seasons. It's frustrating to me because we've seen him be the running back 4 overall on 120 carries. Why are they running Alvin Kamara between the tackles? It makes no sense. I don't think that Dennis Allen is a coach that we can trust to use Alvin Kamara to be a running back 1. And so I think his running back 1 days are behind him. He had not handled more than 194 carries before these last 2 seasons. The addition of Kendre Miller is also an eyebrow raise, a 3rd round pick, and Jamal Williams we mentioned earlier. So they may not usurp Kamara, but it's hard to see Kamara when he returns from suspension maintaining his 75% or higher snap share that he was putting on last year as a low-end running back 1, high-end running back 2 with the occasional spike week. I don't think he will be able to maintain the efficiency that he's shown in previous seasons.
Yeah, don't hate it. I think he's out, but I could see why you're fading him. Mine, Jaxon Smith-Njigba. I just can't get in on the train here. I know the train's left the station. I'm still standing on the platform. Just can't do it. I know he's around 1 pick as well, but Seattle has 2 good receivers ahead of him still. They got DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, both who have consistently finished inside the top 20 at the position in fantasy points per game. It's going to be tough for Jaxon Smith-Njigba to see the field in 2 wide receiver sets. He probably sees it in 3 wide receiver sets, but he's still competing for targets versus those 2 alphas. Not to mention, we know that he just had a broken wrist and surgery, and I know he's already back at practice with it wrapped, but it seems like an uphill battle for him to return value here. You consistently see him go in drafts inside the top 33 at the position, and it's just too rich for my blood.
It is pretty rich. I do like the spike weeks at the end of the season and the correlation with Pittsburgh. If we're in on Pittsburgh taking a step forward, that could be a sneaky shootout game between the Steelers and the Seahawks. And I do want pieces of that game, but I also like how cheap Tyler Lockett is going. And DK Metcalf falls in some drafts. And so I'm in on getting some DK. So I can see maybe if we're fading JSN a little bit, we are going after those other 2 pass catchers. For me, round 8, and there's going to be a similarity in round 9. Round 8 is Skyy Moore. And for me, my view of Skyy Moore is that his best chance to consistently produce for this Chiefs offense would be out of the slot. Problem is, the Chiefs brought in a 90% slot route runner in Richie James, who is actually pretty decent. Last year, James had a 24% target rate. He's wide receiver 35 in yards per route run, wide receiver 27 in formation adjusted yards per route run. He was wide receiver 11 in route win rate, wide receiver 9 in win rate versus man coverage, and wide receiver 27 in fantasy points per target on the Giants, right? Skyy Moore, he dominated in college, but it was at Western Michigan, right? So it may have taken him a little bit to acclimate. And last season, he did have a 22% target rate, but he only eclipsed 50% snaps once during the season. We were deceived by the Chiefs last year that there would be a wide receiver to step up. And I know that Skyy Moore is a big-time favorite, but I struggled to find where the 5'9", undersized wide receiver can make a living in this offense, given the struggles that he showed last year.
Well, this is a tough one for me, Bradley. I think that the offense is so good that it may not matter where he's running out of, and they have a lack of weapons altogether. I have him inside of my top 36 of the position in my projections. I think he has a lot of outs. I can see why you want to fade him, but I'm not on board with it. You might be the same with me on this one. I'm fading Zay Flowers in round 8 for kind of opposite reasons. For me, it breaks down to, again, seeing the field. We have Bateman on the offense. They brought in Odell Beckham. They have an alpha tight end, very similar to Travis Kelce. But the biggest difference between these 2 offenses is the passing volume.
Yes.
Kansas City is projected for top 3 pretty easily in overall pass attempts, where Baltimore is projected for bottom 10. And that's even with a big boost in volume based upon the new Monken offense. So I like Zay as a talent. I think he's an outstanding talent. I loved what he did at Boston College. I just don't know if 2023 is the year that we're going to see his breakout.
Yeah, I see Skyy Moore and Zay Flowers at about the same projection. Yeah. That's what that's the projection. So pretty close. I am a little worried about Zay Flowers as well from the volume perspective. So I see yours there. Round 9, similar theme. We have to be skeptical of the Kansas City Chiefs wide receivers, and I am also lumping Kadarius Toney in there. Look, we love Toney as like the human joystick. Billy, I think that's how you refer to him quite affectionately, but I think he sometimes jukes himself out of his own body. Like he wants to go one way and his body is like, no, I just can't do it. And so it breaks down, right? It'll be hard to know when to start Toney in your redraft leagues, and Stack Hunters is primarily a best ball league. But the problem with this is that Toney is still being drafted in like the top 100, top 110. So in the first 10 rounds or so, he missed all of the valuable offseason reps due to the knee surgery. It could have led to a full-time role, but he doesn't even profile as an X receiver. A lot of schemed touches instead of he's earning his way open. So my concerns with Kadarius Toney and Skyy Moore is that there's ambiguity here. We're not sure if they are going to be able to take that next step forward. And in particular for Kadarius Toney, we already have a litany of red flags this offseason. It's not worth it, at least in the round 9 price tag that we're getting.
I'm 100% on board with the Toney fade. I think the guy is talented, but I just think he'll never see the field in full capacity. My round 9 fave, and I'm going to keep this on brand for Player Profiler, is Quentin Johnston. I don't really like the talent. I didn't really like the tape. I think he's slow. I don't see what I think. I've watched his tape because I don't watch a lot of college football. Like I'll watch some and I'll watch tape on the players they declare, and I'll watch highlights, and then I'll go through and then I'll watch full games with them, but I don't sit there and watch the entire season. Right. And so the games that I went and watched, because I watched his tape and highlights, and I was like, I'm not that impressed with Quentin Johnston. And then I went and watched like a couple full games to see if I was missing anything. And I just don't see what people are so enamored with this kid. Like, I just don't like him. Like, I don't like his tape. I don't like his separation. And, you know, now we've seen him in preseason struggling with drops. Word on the street now is that Trey Palmer's running ahead of him with the ones. Or not, sorry, Trey Palmer. Josh Palmer's running ahead of him with the ones. And I have concerns with Quentin Johnston. The only thing I think that's even coming close, remotely close to saving him, is the volume. This is the offense I have for the most pass attempts in the league, and love the addition of Kellen Moore. So I have only taken Quentin Johnston less than a handful of times in the couple hundred drafts that I've done. And I do not see myself adding much more of him, if any, as the season progresses towards next week.
Well, and looking at my projections, I put Josh Palmer projected for more points and half PPR scoring than Quentin Johnston. And that was before the Matthew Kelly Player Profiler brand started to explode on the anti-Quentin Johnston train. But here we are. I was fading Josh.
Easy to dislike the guy. I want to see like an argument for him. Like people just talk about, they like him as a talent. It's like I just don't even see the talent.
Oh. Ooh, all right. Well, on that front, we will finish out with round 10. We're going to do 10 rounds, and then both Billy and I are going to offer a late round avoid, and then we'll see if there's any special surprises at the end of Billy. My round 10 fade is Rashaad Penny. And look, you should not have been in on the Trey Sermon hype, right? That was a false narrative. Trey Sermon got cut today for those who were not paying attention. But for those who want to get in on it, join the Player Profiler Discord channel and check out the news desk, because a lot of chatter happens in the news desk to determine whether or not something is newsworthy, to determine whether or not rumors will come to fruition. And then, of course, something new on the news desk is the writers in the news desk add legitimate news to each of the players' profiles. So you can go to a player's profile on the website. You can search them up, find their name, and you can click on news and notes, and you'll find the most recent news about that player. So if you go to the Discord for Player Profiler, you'll get all this news. And the news was that Trey Sermon got cut. So the former 3rd round pick for your San Francisco 49ers, Billy. Now, remember, Rashaad Penny is coming off a season-ending injury himself. He missed 12 games last year. And some fantasy analysts, it wouldn't be me, of course, and Billy, I don't think it would be you either, but some fantasy analysts might say that Penny crushed last year. He absolutely crushed out of the gate. And he did have the volume because Kenneth Walker was dealing with the hernia surgery and got the volume, to start the season because Kenneth Walker was out. But it's not necessarily true. That's a false narrative that Penny crushed. Penny finished outside the top 30 of weekly running backs in 4 of the 5 games he played before his injury. His one spike week came against one of the worst defenses at the time, and that was the Detroit Lions. We know how bad the Lions were on defense. He totaled 157 yards, 2 touchdowns, but Penny is a fragile asset. He has not proven that he can be a consistent high-end producer. And then you mentioned earlier that the Philadelphia Eagles don't like throwing to the running back. And so Rashaad Penny is going to have to be efficient with the volume. And there are other players that are valuable rushing the ball in this offense. Jalen Hurts gets the goal line work. DeAndre Swift is there. I believe Swift is the better talent or the best talent of all of the running backs. You've got the annoying Boston Scott, who somehow gets 3 touchdowns every year against the New York Giants. And then Kenny Gainwell has been steamed up lately. So I think Rashaad Penny has many paths to failure and only really one path to success, and that is holding off all of those running backs and then having the touchdown regression to match it. So Rashaad Penny for me, a round 10 fade.
Oh, man, you know me. I've always been a huge Penny fan, but this is the one year that I have actually faded him. Didn't like the cost associated with him, especially when he was added over to this new offense. Got to love the offensive line, which might help him stay a little healthier, but I just know that we're not going to see him 10 games, right? We might see him 6, 7, 8. Might be lucky there, but last year played 5 games, 2021 played 10, the year before 3, the year before that 9, 13 in 2018 as a rookie. He has yet to finish an entire season. We've seen how athletic he's been, but I don't think that we're going to get the commitment from the Eagles with Penny for him to pay off at this price. So I'm fully on board with fading Penny at cost this year. My round 10 fade this year, and I can't believe it's a round 10 pick. Like, I probably wouldn't even take this guy in like round 12, is Juju Smith-Schuster. He belongs on TikTok, not on the NFL field anymore. He was not able to get it done in the Kansas City Chiefs offense, where he played 16 games and still only saw 101 targets. I think that he was at one point in Pittsburgh a great receiver, but I don't think that we're ever going to see that Juju Smith-Schuster again, and especially not with Hoodie and the Patriots. And we saw Mac Jones struggle mightily at times, and I just don't think Juju Smith-Schuster is going to give any return on his value there. Last year, even in arguably one of the best offenses in football, if not the best, wide receiver 35 in fantasy points per game, only saw 3 touchdowns, 763 air yards. And so there's just a lot of negatives with Juju Smith-Schuster, and I don't see how him going to the Patriots is going to be beneficial for him in his fantasy success.
Yeah, the Patriots was a bad landing spot. It was also a bad choice by the Patriots to not re-sign Jacoby Myers when they could have signed him for cheaper. I think Juju signed for a more expensive contract or a similar contract than Jacoby Myers. Myers clearly the better wide receiver at this point. Just to talk about Juju for a second, he was inconsistent, at least before, in the first half of the season. He had some nice spike week games, but in the second half of the season, he never recovered from that concussion and the knee injury. Like, he just was not the same player in the second half of the season throughout the playoffs. And we have to be concerned about how he's going to play on this Mac Jones led New England offense. We do expect New England to be a better offense, but maybe not by much. And notably, New England has cut so many players. They only have 2 active running backs and 1 active quarterback as of this recording, Billy. So, but just Mac Jones, just Rhamondre Stevenson, just Ezekiel Elliott. So this offense is lacking. And I agree with your your Juju Smith-Schuster fade, also because Mike Gesicki plays a lot in the slot, right? And if we like Mike Gesicki as a big power tight end touchdown guy, then he might be taking away that fantasy opportunity as well from Juju running in the end zone. Billy and I are going to offer a late round avoid. And this is a player going round 11 through round 20 that we just aren't touching anyways. It's a less than 2% exposure type of player, a player that we see lots of paths to failure and not a lot of paths for success. For me, and this hurts my heart, Billy, because this was one of my sleeper guys, or a guy I deep cut rookie sensation for your 49ers way back when we were the fantasy football fanalists. Elijah Mitchell. I love Elijah Mitchell's talent. I love his speed, his athleticism. The problem is that even if Christian McCaffrey gets hurt, the role for Elijah Mitchell is not clear. Will the handcuff position be Jordan Mason, who has played very well during camp, made the 53? Tyrion Davis-Price made the 53. Is it going to be him? We don't know. He was a third-round pick this past year, or last year, right? 2022. Is it going to be Deebo Samuel? Will the 49ers lean more on Deebo if McCaffrey goes out? I think the answer would be yes. But I loved Elijah Mitchell, but it doesn't seem like he is the clear favorite to earn direct handcuff work. And where he's going in the handcuff range, I would rather give me Tyler Algier instead, because if Bijan goes down, we know it's going to be Tyler Algier, right? Give me Jaylen Warren instead. If Najee goes down, it's probably going to be Jaylen Warren. So give me those types of handcuffs in that same range over Elijah Mitchell.
I'm on board with this. Mitchell, we talk about contingent value, and it's all contingent based upon CMC's health, but his contingent value could also be lost in the same week because he has not been the model of consistency or health himself. And we've seen Elijah Mitchell consistently break down. So he could earn the role and lose the role simultaneously with an injury of his own. And at that cost, it's just a little steep for me. So I have not been drafting Elijah Mitchell either. And I'd probably just play the waiver wire with the other backs who are going undrafted. My fade, also a handcuff running back that people I think are overdrafting right now. And that is going to be Kendre Miller. I don't see a lot of paths to success here. So I do think that he probably sees the field a little bit more while Kamara is suspended. But that being said, the Saints paid up for Jamal Williams. They also have the most annoying tight end in football who plays running back in Taysom Hill, who is going to consistently see goal line touches and special packages. And so people, like, when you're doing projections, you have to account for Taysom Hill seeing like 40 to 50 rushing attempts. And that eats into the overall share of the pie when you have three backs on top of it. So none of these backs are going to see more than 40% or 45% of the total rushing volume. Jamal Williams probably going to see the 30 range. Kendre Miller now, if he's lucky, he's going to see 20 to 25%. Depends upon how much Taysom Hill is going to be involved. And so it's just very muddied. I think he's a great dynasty play and a dynasty stash, but I just don't love his chances at success in 2023.
I'm in with you on Kendre Miller as a player that he's third in the pecking order. He's got two guys who are in front of him, and we do like the rushing volume, but as you mentioned, it's going to be hard for Kendre to break through, at least in this year, to be a fantasy contributor. Now, maybe week 17, maybe by that time he's getting a significant workload, but maybe not. It is pretty late in the game for Kendre Miller. He was also dealing with a knee injury this offseason, so we'll see how slowly the Saints do work him into the rotation, because if his primary time to get work is at the beginning of the season, but his knee isn't there, it's probably going to be a lot of Jamal Williams for the first 3 weeks or so.
And that very annoying vulture, Taysom Hill.
And Taysom Hill. All right, Billy, we got a couple questions in the chat. You want to answer a few and then we'll peace out?
Let's do it.
All right, this guy 12 wants to know about ETN and Dameon Pierce. They've been getting steamed up all of a sudden a bunch. What's up with that? And I think that the Dameon Pierce getting steamed up has to do with the routes run that he's been having in the offseason.
Yep.
I was not a Dameon Pierce guy until we started seeing different usage for him. There were rumors way back when I was a guest on Mind of Mansion. It was that week where rumors were flying that this San Francisco quarterbacks coach, now the offensive coordinator, was going to use Dameon Pierce in the Christian McCaffrey role. And Matt Kelly and I were both scoffing at that. But maybe it's not Christian McCaffrey, but maybe Christian McCaffrey light. How much are you buying Dameon Pierce getting some passing down role?
I think it's going to happen. He's climbed up my projection slightly. I'm not as high as a lot of people are, but even as a rookie last year, he was fairly involved, and we saw 39 targets, wide receiver 30 in overall targets, 30 receptions. And so it wasn't like it was nothing, but it wasn't a lot. But from a rookie perspective, in only 13 games, you got to like what you saw. And so he was a player that I think I misevaluate coming out of college. And I think that I underestimated how hard he was going to run and really like what I saw when he was on the field in Houston. 13 games, almost 1,000 rushing yards on 220 attempts. So we think this offense is going to be better. We know that they're probably going to lean into Dameon Pierce quite a bit, at least on the ground game. And we've seen what Devin Singletary is, and I don't think he's a real threat to Dameon Pierce's workload. So I understand why he's steaming up. And if we can see that targets go more for like 42, 45 range this year, maybe closer to 50, then I think it's well worth the steam.
And then Travis Etienne is also getting bumped up. I think this is just natural juice for the Jacksonville Jaguars offense, plus the Tank Bigsby fumble in the preseason right at the goal line. Some people are like, oh, they're not going to put Tank Bigsby in that role moving forward. I don't know. I'm taking some Tank Bigsby as a handcuff possibility in the best ball leagues. Like, rotate him through. If you're not taking some Etienne, do sprinkle in some Tank Bigsby. But I don't mind drafting Travis Etienne. I've seen him fall into the fifth round, fourth, fifth round, late fourth, fifth round. I'm fine with Travis Etienne.
Yeah, I haven't really seen any steam on Etienne. He's kind of been going where he's been going all year. If anything, he's actually fallen in draft rooms in the last couple of weeks. I've gotten a couple of round 5 shares where he was consistently going in round 4 for a while. Even prior to that, he was going in round 3. I think he's probably priced appropriately. And if anything, he might climb a little bit based upon the news out of Jaguars camp that Bigsby's going to be earning more reps as the season goes on. And so that would just kind of lead me to believe that Etienne is going to be in the field a lot more early and often.
All right, last question for the night, and then we'll let you go, Billy, probably to another draft. ML, good friend, ML, wants to know about the FFPC mains, in particular, late round wide receivers. Washington, all can do it, man, Curtis Samuel, or leaning on rookie sensation, slot receiver Josh Downs for Indy. Who would you be targeting, given, especially in the context, ML mentions the Washington playoff schedule being brutal? Does that change your perspective of Curtis Samuel, or is it the Josh Downs show in Indy?
Can I say neither? Can I just not draft either of these guys? This is the range where I'm typically taking handcuff running backs, and I'm looking for upside plays at the position. I would rather have my 5 or 6 receivers earlier in the draft, someone that's going to see a lot more snaps, someone that's going to be regularly involved in red zone packages, someone that's going to see closer to 25% target share. And then best ball, great. I'll take a chance on these guys. I'd go Curtis Samuel. But main event, I'm taking upside shots at running back here. This is the range that I'm drafting all the handcuff running backs, not my handcuff, but other people's handcuffs, especially in these tournament builds. You're talking about the Evan Holes, you're talking about the Deion Jacksons, you're talking about Rico's probably climbing today now with the cut of Malik. But these are the range you're taking all these players previously for that upside shot to give you another chance at a top tier running back.
Billy, give us the drops. Where are you at? How can people follow you, find you? Give us the goods.
Well, of course, here on Player Profiler, I do all the rankings and projections. I'm updating the projections tonight after this, actually. No drafts tonight because I got a lot of news to update. Did a draft before this, but I do have a lot of projections to finalize tonight. And then tomorrow, updating the analyst cheat sheet and reviewing the projections with Dario, looking for anything that we may have missed. So those will be updated by tomorrow afternoon. I want to get those out for everybody. So when you're going into your weekend drafts, you have the most up-to-date information. Podcast this week, 7 days straight on the Dominator. We're drafting daily, doing FFPC drafts, doing a bunch of Fantasy Pros Championship drafts on the Player Profiler feed. And that's going to be on the Dominator. And then I'm going to be in Vegas next week drafting. So if you're going to be at the FFPC drafts, come say hi to me. I'd love to have a drink with you, catch up and talk football.
All right. On behalf of Billy, I'm Bradley. Make sure you guys have hit the subscribe button on the YouTube channel. And until next time, good luck in your drafts, everyone.
That was Samuel.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.